afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for the opportunity to give me to talk about this work. So the story is here about data poor, but fairly data poor case, but where decisions are extremely important. It's safety of consumers. And there is a fairly good knowledge about the biology under that it's so here is the domain knowledge situation where we know quite a lot about the mechanism that is triggering skin sensitization. And why this work was done was because the situation in the safety world is changing very fast and very dramatically due to societal concerns and like protecting the animals and not conducting cruel tests. And as well as advances in the molecular understanding and advances in the in general understanding of underlying biological molecular basis of the biological processes, which point to the fact that mice or rats were not the best models of humans. There is interest of switch to this new type of tests. And, well, yes, that's good. But on the other hand, it's not very clear how we should put the story together when we have this different data streams. And I will give you very specific examples of these data streams to eventually infer about the then endpoints. Well, in this case, it is skin sensitization, but we have to do it for other endpoints. Very, very serious endpoints, such as carcinogenicity, skin irritation. I mean, there is a whole plethora of different endpoints that need to be assessed before any product is placed on the market. And in some cases, these effects are immediate, but in some cases, they are delayed. And in this case, we have delayed effects. Skin sensitization does not happen, the moment you touch. It happens when you go through this so-called induction phase, but it is, from the biology point of view, it's not like the moment you test, you will immediately know that you are going to have allergic response. So, how do I?
It doesn't work.
Okay. Like I said, there are these societal reasons to abandon animal testing, but actually there is in Europe, there has been the legislation has been passed. It's called Cosmetics Directive that bans animal testing for any cosmetics placed on the market. So industry has to have a different approach than the mice testing approach. And the tools that we have in our hands is a variety of, in silico computer models. And then they are not necessarily predicting sensitization. In fact, few of them they do. Okay, but what these models do is they will tell you about metabolic transformations, oxidation that may happen in the body. There is a lot of biology knowledge that can be generated. Actually, it is more a computational chemistry than strictly biology. So this is one data stream. There is also increasing number of so-called in vitro assays. So these are different types of assays in vitro assays that they test particular molecular mechanisms. They can test binding to a protein. So there is a lot of this type of biological assays that people knowing the mechanism of skin sensitization They are developing these assays to infer about, well, small parts of the process that eventually is triggered. So we never have a full picture, right? We never have a full picture, and therefore people are thinking that we need to have a battery of tests. And of course, the story is, how do we put this battery of tests in a way that it will provide information to the risk assessors. So I will take you through the story of how I developed this system, this decision support system that is currently embedded in the BayesiaLab. It is used in P&G already for 3 years, and later it was adopted by other companies. I know that Kao in Japan is using it. There are other Japanese companies like Shiseido, it's a cosmetics company, that it's playing with it. And so slowly we are getting traction and people are converting it. And why? Because there was an evaluation of the system lasting about 1 year here actually at OECD headquarters in Paris. And the approach was given a blessing by OECD as an accepted approach. So now this system is not only scientifically acceptable, but also is considered acceptable by regulators. So someone can submit an assessment of the skin sensitization based on this system, and OECD will say, yep, okay. So I will not go through details, but what I want to say is that the mechanism of skin sensitization is a multi-step mechanism. The allergen, the chemical, has to cross through the skin, has to reach deeper layers of the skin, and then there are these processes. It has to bind covalently to specific skin proteins. Then there is activation of this inflammatory cytokines, and then there are several follow-up processes. What I'm trying to say is that this knowledge has been coded to so-called key events, and on the understanding of the key events, people are developing assays that characterize presence or lack of particular key event. Okay, and what is also known is that certain key events have to happen, but certain key events do not have to happen, and you still get sensitization. So it is not a sequential process. And actually, on a higher abstraction level, you can think about this skin sensitization process that this is a network where we kind of simplify the picture and we choose these key events that we can observe, and this is how, this is our basis of, we will never be able, for variety of reasons, to observe all the elements. So this less important key events, and less important doesn't mean that they are generally, there might be critical key events that will just be only important for a few chemicals, and yet we'll miss it. So there is quite a lot of uncertainty in the system, but that's the reality. So how can we abstract this process that I showed you on the previous slide to a network? And before I go to this, I just want to also keep in front of us what is the need, what people want. They want a decision support system that synthesizes information in a cumulative manner, but always gives the mechanistic interpretation of the result. And that might be different, of course, in other applications. In safety, mechanistic interpretation is required because this is absolutely needed to justify conclusion that chemical is safe for use by the consumers. And then we also have to think about the reality that is, well, not always it's possible to have all the information. In some cases, these biological assays, they cannot be conducted because chemical is not soluble, so assay A does not work and only assay B will work. So it's not like always the whole fingerprint, let's call it, can be generated. Sometimes there are situations where only partial information can be generated. And then we want to, with this reality, we still want to not to waste time and generate all the information at the beginning, but do it in a staged way and choose like a preset that gives us, well, information we need, let's say, for hazard assessment, and hazard is a binary type of assessment, toxic, not toxic, without any stratification. But we do want to see how we can develop this testing strategy if we need to have a refinement of the information, reduction in uncertainty, and how this testing sequence should be organized in order to maximize information. So with that, when I heard the need, and I knew this is let's say the problem, I chose, based on these conceptual requirements, I chose Bayesian network approach to this integrated testing strategy. And well, here, I know that you are all experts in Bayesian networks, so I don't have to go through all this in detail, but I kind of linked the feature of the network with the function. For example, that I can build I can build a hypothesis with partial data in any sequence because I can eliminate. I can eliminate this data that are outside so-called applicability domain of certain assays. I can also take into account the information overlap between individual assays, and that reduces the number of false positives and false negative classifications. And many other very, very important features. And then here is the one that really very closely links to previous talk about the structure of the network represents the underlying mechanistic process leading to the in vivo adverse effect. And while recognizing the uncertainty of the exact formalism, and that allows for the interpretation in the biological context and is chemical specific. I think that this is so important in my world to have this mechanistic interpretation. That it's actually one of the most important functionalities of the Bayesian network approach. So, to move on, I will show you now how I built in a data poor situation this Bayesian network, where my target was still an old animal assay called LNA. It actually spans 4 orders of magnitude, but I classified it into 4 potency classes, non-sensitizers, weak, moderate, and strong. And the type of assays, you can see that there are, for each of these key events, there are sometimes more than one of assay, sometimes there is only one, and the data set I dealt with, 200, and it is the best data set, 200 chemicals, that's it. And it is the best data set currently available. Why? Because the assays are novel, like this H-CLAD assay, developed by the Japanese, has been just approved last year. So this is this is really a frontier of I mean, as we are developing the methodology for integration, there is a frontier in terms of developing inputs to this integration model. So the network structure actually was, it really was built on the it looks very, maybe, I mean, I would have to spend more time and I will not, but each arc, almost each arc, I'll talk about this, has a mechanistic basis, and which I could develop by talking with specialists. And then, once I had that, I ran the model, and I knew that it's not great. And I also then I checked for the arcs that would be would be. So first, the arcs were purely. I drew them manually and based on the domain knowledge, and then I added the arcs, which were showing up based on the statistical basis. And this is a very interesting story, because these arcs I took back to toxicologists, and we had lots of discussions about their interpretation. And in fact, they came back and they said that it provided them a completely different view on certain elements of this system. And mechanistic, mechanistic information, and they were able to further refine and verify the mechanistic information, including the old assay, this RNA assay. It showed some deficiencies which people kind of suspected, but this is not even my slide, this is a toxicologist slide who discusses this. With the toxicologists, but it really provided a lot of mechanistic information. So this was a complex way of building the assay, and you probably also noticed that there were some arcs with very low mutual information, but I decided to keep them because they were very much grounded in the mechanistic knowledge. And what it was saying is that we are representing this mechanistic knowledge in a poor way. And actually, I know that now we're building the next generation of this work, and we have a better way of representing the bioavailability. It's actually concentration in the epidermis. You know, you have multiple layers in your skin, and there is this one particular depth at which the key things happen. It's so hard to measure or model this, so that's why we are not good in capturing bioavailability. Anyway, so you know, when you talk with customers, they like safety group, they always want the performance of the network, and here is the performance based on the test set of 60 chemicals. For different types of decisions, so you have the hazard, so it's yes, no, this GHS classification is 3 bins, and then we have these 4 potency classes. So it is doing a pretty good job. And in fact, it is doing the best job in the world. You don't have a better model today than this. I'm the author, so it's not easy to say this. Okay, so what I want to say is that the benefit of using Bayesian network was not only to develop this integration model, but to come up with a clearly defined process to derive prediction from these multiple data streams. And we use a lot of domain knowledge to actually to interpret the data after the prediction is made. So there is a the check of completeness of evidence, and that is related to which key events were triggered and which were not, and there is a knowledge of what to do when there are some missing points. Then I talk about these applicability domains and only using the relevant information. And eventually, all these probability distributions are converted to Bayes factors, and this is the easiest way to communicate the result, and that's how the results are communicated. So, the report usually looks like this. So there is a fingerprint for a chemical. There is this evidence check, completeness, and then the predictions, and then with the Bayes factors. Very easy to capture. In some cases, it is. I mean, this is something for the future, but anyway, this is something that will be important when we have more data streams, and we will have more data streams in this case, to kind of have this evidence interpretation chart. And all this has been developed by my colleague, Michael Thompson. And he has a chart where on the horizontal axis you have a consistency with all other evidence, and this can be calculated within BayesiaLab. And then impact given all other evidence, and again, this is calculated within BayesiaLab. And I mean, this is like additional piece of reporting. But because it is important, why in some cases, this is important when you have a conflicts of evidence, and this helps to understand what happens is when we have conflict and how this conflict impacts overall hypothesis. We also use prior in the context of this model. That is still in the training, but I am working with toxicologists to convert their hypothesis on similar chemicals to a probability distribution, and then it's very easy to implement it in the BayesiaLab and use prior information together with this molecular fingerprint. And then the last slide is about, again, something that we turned out to be important for our decision system. So people didn't like the probability distribution because they said, how are we going to say, here is the story, well, it's the highest, but this is also very high, I have to make a decision, this is a big decision between the non-sensitizer and moderate sensitizer. And this is, if the chemical is a non-sensitizer, green light. If it's moderate, then you can release it, but at a very limited concentration in the product. So it makes a huge impact on the product design. And so, what to do? I said, okay, we switch to Bayes factors, and everybody here probably knows Bayes factors, which is the ratio between the posterior and prior odds. And then we switched, and now people like it. They have one number, they have control over consistency of the decision, and yeah, that's how it works. So my job was to actually try to use quite sophisticated tool, but to bring it to the user in such a way that it became user-friendly. That's why today I didn't hear much about mathematics. It's really about the application and how I worked on the application and how not staying in constant touch with the toxicologists, which were my customers. So yeah, I took you through this development. I showed you how we identify conflict, and we improved our transparency and consistency in decision making. And also, we reduced conservatism because, the experts, we compared. We made that is another thing. This opened more possibilities for the product design because experts, these toxicology experts, they are conservative, and in the absence of quantification of risk, they tend to go for conservative. So when we compared the objective way of data fusion with what their decisions, was quite different. But now we have this consistent system that gives us the benefit of less conservative decisions, and like I showed you, we develop also easy documentation. Thanks.